Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We are 60 days out from Election Day, and if you were hoping that Donald Trump would be headed to jail before then, well, it's not happening. I mean, it was never going to happen really before the election, but it's officially not happening. Sentencing was supposed to come this month for the 34 felony convictions in that New York hush money case. He was convicted in the spring. Today, Manhattan Judge Juan Merchan agreed to delay Trump's sentencing until late November after the election. We'll have much more on that later. There is one pivotal event still coming in just 4 days. That is the first, possibly the only debate between Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. That debate will be hosted by ABC News in Philadelphia next Tuesday. According to the rules, there will be no live audiences, no opening statements in the hour-and-a-half debate. Only the moderators can ask the candidates questions. And in what's been painted as a win for the Trump campaign, the candidate's mic will be muted when they are not on the clock to answer a question. The Harris team wanted mics to be open throughout, presumably so viewers could hear all of Trump's outbursts. Both camps see this debate as a kind of make-or-break moment. Of course, the most consequential debate in modern presidential history was almost certainly the last one between President Biden and Donald Trump in June. That debate was ultimately what led to President Biden taking the completely unprecedented step of choosing to forego the Democratic Party nomination so that his Vice President Harris could claim the top of the Democratic ticket. Since then, the Harris-Walz campaign has been rolling. The Trump polling lead has basically evaporated. In fact, he's down in the national polling average now, which is why some Trump campaign insiders recently told The Guardian they are praying for debate win to boost their candidate. This is probably going to be the biggest audience either candidate will speak to. It's almost certainly going to have enormous ratings. We kind of know what Trump does as a debater. I mean, he's been in dozens of debates, and this will be, the seventh, I guess, one he does in a general election. And that June debate with Biden, he was, I got to say, uncharacteristically sharp and focused, at least for the first 20 minutes or so, before he just completely, unraveled. For example, here is one of Trump's answers in that debate.
The Paris Accord was going to cost us $1 trillion. And China nothing, and Russia nothing, and India nothing. It was a ripoff of the United States. And I ended it because I didn't want to waste that money because they treat us horribly. We were the only ones who was costing us money. Nobody else was paying into it. And it was a disaster. But everything that he said just now, I'll give you an example. I heard him say before insulin. I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical programs because the migrants coming in, they want everybody. And look, I have the biggest heart on the stage. I guarantee you that. And I want to take care of people. But we're destroying our country. They're taking over our schools, our hospitals, and they're going to be taking over Social Security. He is destroying Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Sort of a sample. That's like a standard Trump debate riff. Of course, almost everything he said there is completely untrue, especially him taking credit for bringing down insulin costs. Biden is the one who statutorily capped insulin at $35 a month with a bill that he signed into law. But what do you think the question was that Trump was answering there? Go ahead, give it a guess. Probably wrong.
Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives, but will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
The answer is no, obviously. So even at what you might call the top of his game, Donald Trump doesn't really have anything of substance to say if you move him off any of his rally riffs, right? The border, et cetera, he's got nothing. The longer the night goes, the more off-topic and self-interrupting he gets. We've seen that both in the debate and his convention speech. And crucially, if the moderators of the debate follow the lead of the last one, there will be zero fact-checking of Trump after those wild rants. And so the unanswered question is how Harris will deal with all that on the debate stage Tuesday night, which will be the first time she and Trump ever meet in person. She has reportedly been in debate prep with former Clinton aide Philippe Reines, standing in as Trump, as he did for Hillary in 2016. Harris does have experience in big debates, including in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. In fact, at one point in those debates, when the discussion turned to race in America, and Harris stole the spotlight by calling out Joe Biden.
Ms. Williamson, thank you very much.
Vice President Biden, we're going to get to you. Hang on, we're going to get to
stage. I would like to speak on the issue of race. Senator Harris, and so what I will say is that if I could preface this, we will give you 30 seconds of this. We're going to come back to you on this again in just a moment. Go for 30 seconds.
Okay. So on the issue of race, I couldn't agree more that this is an issue that is still not being talked about truthfully and honestly. There is not a black man I know, be he a relative, a friend, or a coworker, who has not been the subject of some form of profiling or discrimination. Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black. And I will say also that in this campaign, we have also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
It's a testament to Harris's performance and to Biden's humility. He ultimately chose her as his running mate after that exchange, which was sort of the exchange of that debate series. And it gave her a chance to debate the sitting Vice President, Mike Pence.
And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And, you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then, thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking.
Yeah, you can have 15 more seconds, and then we'll give the Vice President a chance to respond.
So I want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back?
She's a former prosecutor. She's acquitted herself well against the current sitting president and her predecessor as vice president. But she's never debated Trump before, and debating Trump is a different matter completely. I'm not sure anyone has really figured it quite out yet. David Jolly is a former Republican congressman of Florida, Alencia Johnson, Democratic strategist, who served as a senior advisor for the 2020 Biden-Harris campaign, and they join me now. Alencia, this is the framework I've been thinking of. And, you know, Joe Biden, I thought, did a very good job against Donald Trump in 2020 in the debates. I think Hillary Clinton did in 2016. It's unclear, like, what winning the debate actually gets you in some senses, because, you know, Trump, it's like, what can you show about Trump that hasn't been shown already? So my question for you is, what do you see as the goals for Harris in this? Like, you got to sort of control what you can control. You've got a huge audience. You've got an opportunity to speak to them. What are you trying to do independent of what he does?
Well, I want to be actually very frank that Vice President Harris is the underdog here. This will be the third cycle that former President Trump has been debating in a presidential debate. And so with that, Vice President Harris is not only going to have to continue to make her policy positions clear and continue to make the disposition that she constantly does, but push back on the dangerous extremist rhetoric that will indefinitely come from President Trump. You know, I think Vice President Harris, as we've seen in those clips prior to this, as well as what we've seen in the judiciary hearings when she was a senator, she is very clear on prosecuting a case. But I want us to make sure that when we're watching this, is someone, the first time having a presidential debate against a former president, someone who could not be controlled. And to be honest, his campaign has begged for basically stipulations to ensure he looks presidential, and that the Harris campaign has agreed to. And so it'll be interesting to watch, and I'm looking forward to seeing how unpresidential President Trump looks, and quite frankly, presidential Vice President Harris looks.
Yeah, on that sort of mic cutting thing, this is from Politico reporting earlier this afternoon that Harris team worried she'll be handcuffed by the debate rules that were set, again, agreed to by the Biden campaign when Biden was the nominee. Harris had planned to object, fact check, directly question Donald Trump while he's speaking during their debate next week. So she wanted to do some interrupting herself. Now, with rules just finalized to mute the candidates when their opponents speak, campaign officials said Harris advisors are scrambling to rewrite their playbook. David, what do you think?
I'm not sure that exchanges between the vice president and Donald Trump will be the defining moment. I actually don't think there's anything that Donald Trump can do that will really move a persuadable voter. But I think there's a lot that Vice President Harris can. As you said, with Donald Trump, we've seen it all. He's insulted victims of sexual abuse. He's insulted migrants. He's talked in racist and xenophobic language. You name it, he's done it. There's nothing more for him to move the needle on when it comes to his boorishness. But with Vice President Harris, I think it's less about how she answers or what she says in her answers than how. And look, we know that she will do very well in the debate. You played the clips of someone who is a seasoned prosecutor and seasoned at debates. I think the ultimate question for voters who will be taking a measure of Vice President Harris at the debate is not whether or not they believe her, but whether they believe in her. Coming off the momentum of the Democratic National Convention, where there was this swell of support of people saying, okay, I believe in Vice President Harris as the right person to lead the country. In fact, Liz Cheney now saying, I believe Vice President Harris is the vote we should take. Did the American people take the measure of Vice President Harris at the debate stage and say, you know what, this is the person I believe in?